let's begin the composting workshop.
Y ahora comenzaremos el taller de compostir. So what is composting? Composting is using organic scraps and having it turned into soil for food for the plants. The composition of organic matter is what gives nutrients for the plants in the gardens to grow. Entonces, ¿qué es compostir? Compostir es usando raspadas orgánicas y haciéndolos convertir a tierra o comida para las plantas. La decomposición de materiales orgánicos es lo que da nutrientes para que el jardín crezca. We go from organic scraps to nutrient-rich soil to healthy and happy plants. Vamos de raspadas orgánicas a tierra llena de nutrientes, a plantas felices y saludables. Why compost? So composting helps reduce the needs for pesticides, fertilizer, and irrigation. And irrigation is just a fancy way of saying a water system. And it helps inactivate or actually kill potential health pathogens that could make us sick, that could possibly grow on the food that we grow. It increases biodiversity. This helps increase microbial activity, and that's good bacteria that helps our plants grow. It reduces runoff, and it helps build a soil structure. Ahora, ¿por qué compostir? Él reduce las necesidades para pesticidas, fertilizantes y irrigación. Ayuda a inactivar o hasta matar cosas que pueden hacernos enfermos, que pueden crecer en la comida. Ayuda a crecer a diferentes tipos de microbios que ayudan a las plantas a crecer. Él hace que no haya mucha gasto de la tierra, los nutrientes, y ayuda a dar carácter a la tierra que ayuda a crecer las plantas.
All right, and so I'm going to talk about the do's and don'ts of composting. So we have a mixture here of green materials and brown materials, which helps decompose your compost properly. So this is the list that you might want to stick to and you might already be aware of. So you have fruits and vegetables, which add nutrients and moisture. You can give your fruits and vegetables skin and rinds second life, basically, so they don't end up in the landfills. Tea bags also adds more nutrients as well. Coffee that's ground and the filter paper you can also add in as well, which provides 2% of the nitrogen by volume. It's not acidic and it does improve the tilt and the structure of your compost. Next is worm manure. So you can add worm manure to also add nutrients for the compost. You can add grass, plant clippings, chickweed, feathers. Those things also you can add there. They decompose the compost on your lawn, and so it will add the nutrients into the soil, which will eliminate the fertilizer that you might want to add onto your grass. So it'll add much more richness. Shredded paper, sawdust, and wood shavings, same thing. Add in more as soil, adding more richness to them. And it also adds the carbon. The shredded paper act as carbon. The roll tubes and cardboard, same thing. Perfect for your compost. It's a brown material, so it will help it decompose. So the next list I have here is the don'ts. What you don't want to add in your compost is non-organic citrus peels and onion skins. You don't want to add that because a lot of non-organic fruits and vegetables are laced with pesticides and fertilizers on them. So you don't want to add that into your compost because it will not add nutrients. Meat and bones will bring maggots and a very unattractive smell. And so you might attract rodents or animals, and they will come and destroy the compost because they're trying to actually eat off of it. So that's not going to be very useful to you to have a compost. Grease, not a good idea. That would just make the compost very sticky and things will not break down very well. Neither will dairy or cheese or bread. Those things tend to mold quickly. So it would definitely ruin the nitrogen and carbon ratio that you want to add. And pet feces is just a no-no. the only the only manure you want to add is worm. Worm is pretty much the best because it adds soil, nutrients into the soil of the compost. So the next part, what you want to do is always have waste, air supply, microorganization breakdown, heat, fertilizer, and planting. Those are the things you want to stick to when you add to your compost.
Ahora, para lo que quieres agregar y lo que no quieres agregar a su compost. Entonces, aquí tenemos una lista, las cáscaras de los vegetales o las frutas, unas bolsas de té que son de material papel, esos pueden ser usados. Después tenemos el café y lo que sobra del café y el papel de filtre que viene. Estas cosas traen nutrientes y humedad para que puedan dar como una segunda vida a las comidas que sobran, para que no vayan a gasto. Y el café también tiene 2% de nitrógeno por volumen y no es ácido y ayuda en la estructura de su tierra que va a hacer. Si usted corta la hierba, usted ya sabe que lo que sobra también se pueden usar para decomposición, para poner nutrientes en la tierra. Solo que no use fertilizador porque eso no ayuda a los beneficios. Y después tenemos las cáscaras de huevo, ellos tienen mucho calcio y aplastándolos bien duros, eso para que ellos puedan romper esos nutrientes más fácilmente y que decompusen más fácilmente. También las hojas secas, ellos son bien buenos para agregar nutrientes. Y también queremos usar papeles, cartulina, cosas que son en color café, esos ayudan a traer carbón al compost. Cosas que no queremos poner son cosas que no son orgánicas, los pelados de eso o de cebolla, solo porque eso puede contener pesticidas y eso puede dañar todo lo que estamos trabajando creer. Tampoco no queremos poner huesos o carne, ni aceites, quesos o lechera, solo porque eso puede atraer que no queremos y de esas maneras. Y tampoco ellos creen gusanos malos que no ayudan a crecer y más hace para material mala. Y tampoco no queremos poner los sitios de las mascotas porque ellos no ayudan a beneficiar y solo ponen bacteria mala. Entonces queremos estar en muy buena tierra y para hacer eso no queremos poner fertilizantes, queremos tener una buena circulación de aire, queremos tener microbios rompiendo los materiales buenas, queremos un poco de calor y queremos los gastantes de solo los gusanos buenos para usar en nuestra compensación. Okay, next please.
All right, perfect. How to start, what to know before you start composting. I have 4 key things for you. Number 1, composting is not hard. You can do it. Like, you definitely can do it. There's so many ways you can do it. We'll get into that a little bit later. Compost needs to be moisturized, not too hot, not too wet, just nice carbon nutrient rich matter. The majority of composting is made of kitchen scraps, stuff you already have in your home, in your kitchen that you use when you cook, or literally grass, cardboard, paper, those things, natural materials that will already naturally break down. Compost needs to be attended to. So yeah, you got to take care of it. So you want to stir it regularly, fluff it a little bit, but don't hide it behind your shed. Please don't. Just
¿Ok? Entonces, ¿cómo comenzar y qué tienes que saber antes que comiences? Lo básico es que compostir no es difícil, todos lo pueden hacer. Una cosa que es de tener en mente es que para hacer el compostir tenemos que tener una área húmeda, ni muy caliente ni muy mojado, y tener un buen balance de carbón y nitrógeno. Y también para que sepan que la mayoría de los continentes para compostir es hecho de los sobrantes de la cocina, cosas que normalmente ya tiras a la basura, puedes dar segunda vida en usando y creando nueva tierra buena. Y algo que tienes que saber es que compostir es algo que tienes que tener atención y tienes que cuidar. Entonces, no lo escondas debajo o detrás de algo que no se pueda ver. Necesitas darle la vuelta unas cuantas veces. Esto es para dejar que aire entre, porque aire es muy bueno para compostir. Entonces, no se olvide de cuidar de ella también. Next, please.
So now we have 3 methods of composting that you may see in the farm or at school gardens.
Entonces, aquí tenemos 3 métodos de compostir que usted puede ver en lugares públicos o escuelas.
The first method that we have is thermophilic. And thermophilic composting is the practice of breaking down biological waste with heat-loving bacteria, or thermophilic, meaning heat-loving bacteria.
Entonces, termofílico compostir es la práctica en que lo que sobra de las cosas puedan ser decompositazado con termofílico amando bacteria. Esos son bacterias que le encanta el calor.
So the bacteria basically thrives in temperatures between 113 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And there's billions of bacteria in the compost pile that also helps increase the temperature by eating carbon and reproducing.
Entonces, la bacteria le encanta la temperatura de 45 a 71 de grados Celsius, y hay billones de bacterias en una pila de compostir, y eso ayuda a subir la temperatura porque con sus actividades de comer carbón y también reproduciendo.
So food scraps have a high nitrogen content, and it needs to balance the material with rich carbon. So dry leaves and straw are great for that ratio.
Entonces, la comida que sobra, él tiene un gran contenente de nitrógeno y necesita ser balanceado con materiales ricas en carbón, como las hojas secas o lo que usa cuando corta la hierba. El ratio perfecto es 30 partes carbón a 1 parte nitrógeno. Entonces, por 30 partes de hojas secas que usa, necesita 1 parte de comida que sobra.
Next slide, please. And here are just some of the pros and cons of thermophilic composting.
Entonces, aquí hay unos buenos y unos malos beneficios de el termofílico composting.
So first, we have the pros, and the pros are they process large amounts of diverse materials. They work quickly, so under ideal conditions, this could be a pretty quick method for you. The third is it can kill weeds, seeds, and pathogens. which we don't want in our compost. And fourth is on a large scale. This can be done easily in cold weather. So winter's coming up, you can definitely have this be a method that you use.
Entonces, uno de los beneficios de usar termofílico manera de compostir es que usted puede procesar una gran cantidad de materiales diversos. También puede trabajar bien rápido con las condiciones radiales. Él ayuda a matar los semillas de las plantas malas y de patógenos. Y también en una gran cantidad se puede hacer fácilmente en la tierra, en la temperatura fría, porque como él produce su propia calentura, él puede sobrevivir durante este tiempo del invierno que ya viene.
And now some of the cons can be that it is labor intensive. So piling waste, turning the pile, that requires more attention. Second, it can kill off some beneficial microbes. So this is the good bacteria that you want. Sometimes it might kill it off, the good ones, which becomes a disadvantage. The exact ratio may be difficult to achieve, so that 30-to-1 ratio that we talked about, that might be difficult. And lastly, the high temperatures can lead to nitrogen and carbon loss.
Entonces, una de las pérdidas de usando esta método de termofílico compostir es que puede ser laborioso y en que dando la vuelta a la pila es mucho tiempo y requiere mucha atención. También la calentura que esto produce puede matar a los microbios beneficiarios. Y también ese ratio perfecto de 30 partes carbón a un parte nitrógeno es un poco difícil de agarrar bien. Y después, la última es que la temperatura alta puede hacer que pierdas un poco del nitrógeno y el carbón que trabajamos tanto de poner. Okay, next.
Next slide, please. So this is just a picture. Oops. So this is just a picture of an example of a thermophilic compost, what that could look like.
Entonces, esto es un ejemplo de un sitio de termofílico compostir en uno de los jardines que tenemos.
The next method of composting that we have is static compost pile, and this is a cold method versus thermophilic composting.
Entonces, ahora tenemos el método de pila de compostir estática y esto es hecho frío versus el otro que es hecho caliente.
The recipe is simple. It's 50% green materials, so your leaves and other greens, grass clippings, things like that. And 50% wood material, so your browns. That's like wood chips and other woods, sticks, etc.
Entonces la receta es bien fácil. Es 50% de materiales verdes como las hojas, el recortado de las hierbas y después 50% del material leñosa.
You want to avoid weeds and vegetable seeds since these will not be killed in the process. And you also want to cover with a canvas or a tarp to maintain 30 to 35% moisture.
Ok, y esta no es como la otra que usted puede poner las semillas de las plantas. Esta necesita evitar poner hierbas malas o las semillas de vegetales porque estos no se van a matar en el proceso porque es frío. Y también tienes que cubrirlo con una lona para mantener 30 a 35% de humedad. Next.
And the last method of composting that we have is worm composting.
La última método que tenemos es la método compostir de los gusanos.
Using worms to recycle food scraps and other organic materials into a valuable soil amendment called vermicast or worm composting. So the worms basically eat the food scraps, which then becomes compost as they pass through the worm's body.
En esta método usamos gusanos para reciclar los raspados de la comida y otros materiales orgánicos para hacer valioso tierra, una método llamado vermicast o compostir de gusanos. Los gusanos comen ese material de comida y el compost es hecho cuando eso pasa por el cuerpo del gusano.
Next slide, please. And lastly, we just have the benefits of worm castings. It adds water and nutrients retention to your plants. It stabilizes toxins and strengthens plants from the diseases that they can potentially get. The castings lock the carbon in the soil, which then increases the nitrogen level in a form that the plants can use easily. And lastly, it helps the plants grow by boosting the organic matter, the nutrients, and the beneficial microbes in the soil.
El beneficio de usando gusanos para compostir es que retiene agua y nutrientes muy bueno. Ayuda a estabilizar las toxinas para que no hagan daño y ayudan a hacer más fuertes las plantas contra enfermedades. Esto ayuda a asegurar que el carbón se quede en la tierra y ayuda a hacer más nitrógeno para que las plantas puedan usarlos. Entonces, nada se va a gasto. Las plantas, esto ayuda a que ellos creen por materiales orgánicos y que nada de los nutrientes ni microbios beneficiantes se vayan y que todo se pueda ser usado. Next, please.
So now we just want to show you all some videos that we had made for this workshop.
Ahora queremos enseñar unos videos que hicimos para este taller.
This video is the composting method that we see at Reservoir Community Farm, which is thermophilic, one of the methods that we talked about.
Entonces, este video es hecho en nuestro jardín comunitario y esto usa la método de termofílico que ya hablamos anteriormente.
At Reservoir Community Farm, here to speak to Farm Manager Catherine about composting. Let's take a walk. I'm here with Catherine, Reservoir Community Farm Manager. Take it away, Kat.
Hi, thanks for having me on today. So we're here next to Reservoir Community Farm's composting system. This is one that was just put in place a couple weeks ago by Andrew of Black Rock Composting Company. These pallets measure out a cubic yard of compost, and we filled and mixed this with fresh food scraps, the compost from a local juicery, so we have a lot of tropical pineapples and mangoes in here, and then also a good mixture of dry things like sawdust, wood chips, dry leaves, etc. And that creates the mixture of nitrogen-rich and carbon-rich components that work to make our compost. So this is a thermophilic style of composting, meaning that it uses heat to break down organic material. It's broken down by heat-loving bacteria, thermophilic. that grow in colonies in here. If you want to come a little closer, we can actually dig into this compost pile and look at what we're talking about a little bit. You might start to see some steam rising up, and now we've come to this white stuff is the aerobic heat-loving bacteria that breaks down the compost, and so that causes the pile to heat up. This stuff does need oxygen, so every couple of days we take this out and we turn it so that everything gets mixed up together, and also all of the parts are exposed to oxygen, so it has enough energy to continue breaking down. I want to also show you these other thermophilic composting systems we have over here. These are the same. They're thermophilic composting systems, but one of the benefits is that they're receiving oxygen from all sides, and there's a little less oxygen flow on that other one. With these are great because you can just unwind the twine, move it over a few feet, and then shovel the compost from top to bottom into a new thing. And as you can see down here, it's turning into quite nice compost, good dirt that was super nutrient rich and dense, and we can use in our beds when we plant in the spring. Thanks for having me.
We have the school garden composting that the schools in Bridgeport public schools are using, which is a bin composting.
Entonces, esta es la método de compostir que las escuelas aquí en Bridgeport usan. Esto es una método de usando un material, un compartimiento que es diseñado para compostir.
Here are some examples of composting in schools. In this example of a composting bin, we see organic scraps placed inside. The bin has a lid to help protect it from the outside elements. The bin also stops outside creatures from coming in. It has a small door at the side to be able to allow airflow to go in and out and to mix up the compost. Mixing the compost is important to allow air circulation throughout all the new soil and lessen the compacting.